Perhaps the deepest calling a soul can carry is not the one announced by trumpets, but the one guarded in silence until the world is ready to receive it. A boy stands in a field, forgotten by his own household, while inside the house 7 brothers line up to be crowned, and none of them are chosen. Scripture does not soften this humiliation. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Are here all thy children? And he said, There remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. 1 Samuel 16:11. Not summoned, not expected, not even remembered until someone finally asked, yet this forgotten son is the one heaven had already chosen. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. 1 Samuel 16:13. Anointed, in the midst of his own family, with no throne waiting, no crowd watching, no nation yet aware. Before the world discovers what God is doing, God has already decided who will carry it, and what happens next in that boy's life will tell us why some people are found by heaven long before they are ever shown to men. Every hidden season carries its own strange curriculum, one no stage, no title, and no applause could ever teach. The Hebrew word sathar means to conceal, to cover, to keep deliberately out of sight. It is the same root David uses generations later, once he understood what had been done to him. For in the time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion, in the secret of his tabernacle shall he hide me. Psalm 27:5. Hiding, in the language of Scripture, is rarely abandonment. It is protection, preparation, positioning. Consider Moses. Raised inside Pharaoh's palace, educated in Egypt's highest courts, yet Exodus records that at 40 years old he fled into the wilderness of Midian, where he kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. Exodus 3:1. 40 years, not months, not a single season. 40 years hidden among sheep before he ever heard a voice speak to him from a burning bush. Consider Joseph, sold by his own brothers, carried into Egypt as property, forgotten in a prison cell for 2 additional years after even the men he had helped stopped thinking of him at all. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. Genesis 40:23. Only when Pharaoh dreamed did the hidden season finally end. Neither man rescued himself early, neither man exposed his own calling ahead of time. Both were hidden by the very hand that had already chosen them. There is a particular ache reserved for those who know they carry something and cannot yet explain it to anyone, least of all themselves. There is a moment every person reaches when they sense a purpose stirring inside them long before circumstances confirm it, a conviction with no stage, a gift with no audience, a calling with no proof. You feel it in the years that seem to accomplish nothing visible, the position that does not fit, the door that quietly closes, the friendships that fade without explanation, the prayers that seem to disappear into silence. You begin to wonder whether you misheard God entirely, whether the sense of destiny you once felt so certain of was only ever imagination. But hidden seasons rarely announce their purpose while they are still happening. David did not know, tending sheep, that he was being trained to face lions and bears before he would ever face Goliath. Moses did not know, watching flocks in Midian, that he was learning the very wilderness he would lead a nation through for 40 more years. The classroom remains invisible until the assignment finally arrives. What the world calls delay, heaven often calls formation. Here is the revelation that reframes everything. The prophet Isaiah, describing the servant of the Lord centuries before his coming, records these astonishing words, "And he hath made my mouth like a sharp sword, in the shadow of his hand hath he hid me, and made me a polished shaft, in his quiver hath he hid me." Isaiah 49:2. Hidden, like a sword sheathed before battle, hidden, like an arrow concealed inside a quiver before flight, not defective, not forgotten, simply not yet released. Centuries later, Paul reveals that this pattern did not end with the prophets. It became the inheritance of every believer joined to Christ. For ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. Colossians 3:3. Not was hid, is hid. present tense, an ongoing reality even now for anyone whose life is joined to him. The sword remains sharp inside the sheath, the arrow remains true inside the quiver, and the chosen ones of God remain exactly who they were always meant to be, even while hidden from the eyes of everyone else. Perhaps concealment was never the absence of glory, but glory waiting for its appointed hour. David eventually stood before Goliath with a sling shaped by years no one had witnessed. Moses eventually stood before Pharaoh with an authority forged across decades of silence. Joseph eventually stood before his own brothers, second only to Pharaoh himself, and revealed what only heaven had known all along. I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. God did send me before you to preserve life. Genesis 45:4-5. Every hidden season had already been building toward a revealing season. God had simply chosen the timing, and no accusation, no delay, no forgotten prison cell could alter what he had already decided. For in the time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion. Psalm 27:5. Perhaps hiding was never punishment. Perhaps it was the pavilion itself, the place where the chosen are shaped before they are ever shown. So I leave you with this. If God hid Moses in a wilderness for 40 years, and Joseph in a forgotten prison for 2, and David in a field no one thought to search, what is he quietly shaping in you right now, in the very silence you have mistaken for abandonment?